How are you guys doing? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Alaska. We are here. Snow-capped mountains, we saw some icebergs, and we did see one whale. I have a witness, the pilot up there. And then they saw some after 8 o'clock, so, you know, they were a little sleepy today. We're gonna see more Wednesday afternoon when we leave Glacier Bay, 2:30 to 3:30. That's even a better area, so I'm not jumping. I have one leg over the rail. I'm not jumping quite yet. Today is our second program. It's all about wildlife, what Alaska's famous for. And if we ask the residents of the Inside Passage, where we're cruising this week, what is the most impressive animal of them all, I'll bet you 99% of the residents up here would give you a 2-word answer. These guys, killer whales. Now, many reasons why they're impressive. One, this is not a whale. We call them whales because they're so big. 20 feet long, can weigh 10 tons, but in reality, this is the largest, most intelligent dolphin in the ocean. Killer whales are known for their voracious pack attacks. They are nicknamed sea wolves because they hunt together cooperatively. No creature stands a chance out there. Here we have a killer whale grabbing a gray whale by the throat. Once they pick out their prey, the attack happens that fast. Killer whales are at the top of the food chain in the ocean. They eat everything, and nothing eats the killer whale. You know, yesterday in our first program, we talked about living on a little wilderness island. We went right through the neighborhood last night, late about 2 in the morning. I've been out there for 12 years studying killer whales, and the best boat to use is a kayak because you're quiet. There's no engine noise in the water. Well, the first time a pod or family group of killer whales surround you in that little kayak, you nearly die of a heart attack. You're inside a forest of fins. The dorsal fins alone on the male killer whales, the fins are 6 feet tall from the back up to the tapered tip. Baby killer whales are born underwater. There is actually an anti-killer whale, another mature female, standing by to give the baby an elevator ride on her back up to the surface for its very first breath, while the mother recovers from the birthing process. At birth, you guys, a baby killer whale weighs 300 pounds. Then, the next 7 to 10 days, they gain 300 more pounds. They double their body weight in a week, and they're not even on a cruise ship. If we could follow that baby around out there in the ocean, we would see it growing right before our eyes. Now, the reason for that rapid weight gain is they're warm-blooded mammals like we are. That baby's body temperature is 98.6. The ocean temperature is 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So it has to get fat in a hurry. It has to put on a wetsuit, insulating blubber. So right before delivering her baby, mama killer whale gorges on salmon. She triples her normal intake, and all that rich oil and fish goes into her milk, which has twice the fat of ice cream, and it helps the baby to pile on the pounds. Windy days, killer whales often go sailing, and they don't even need a boat. Their body is the boat. Here we have a killer whale, upside down, purposely holding its tail up like a sail, a big scoop to catch all of the wind. You know, it was a very blustery day. I was out on my kayak. I had my sail up, clipping along, thinking I had the whole ocean to myself, when this killer whale came right up alongside me, upside down, like, "Hey buddy, you want a race?" He blew by me, going about 4 knots in the wind with that tail sail. You know, a sign of intelligence in any species is if they invent games or sports, because whoever plays the most learns the most. Just like a human infant, the more our babies play, the more of the world they take in and process, the more they learn. Killer whale is at the top of the food chain in the ocean because it not only stretches its body, but its mind as well. Only been one known case of wild killer whales attacking human beings. And there was a witness to this that saw it all happen in front of him. It happened right here in the Inside Passage, 1956. Two loggers were working on top of an island hillside here. They were cutting down trees with chainsaws, and they were sending the logs down a gravity chute to the ocean below, where they bundled the wood together and had it towed south by tugboat to Vancouver. One day, one of the loggers, a malicious, mean-spirited man, saw a pod or family of killer whales passing down below by the opening of that chute. And that mean-spirited man deliberately timed it so that a log would slide down the chute and torpedo one. It did. It hit a baby killer whale square in the side, severely injuring it. Well, later that day, the two men climbed down the hillside, got into a small rowboat to return to their camp on another island. The killer whales returned. They smashed into that boat. They put both men into the water directly in front of them, and they filled that water and air with a storm of skin-penetrating sonar. High-pitched sounds that pulse out of their lower hollow jawbones. Those sounds penetrate our skin. They bounce off of our internal bones and organs, and the echoes go back to the killer whale's brains. So they take a sound picture, a sonogram, if you will, of what we look like inside. So the two loggers are in the water. Killer whale sonar is hitting them high and low. The mean-spirited man who sent that log down vanished. The other innocent man was left in the ocean untouched. Killer whales have 44 teeth, shown clearly here on a skull, each tooth about as big as your thumb. Scientists believe, so finely attuned, dialed in is their sonar. It is still the envy of the US Navy that these dolphins can even scan internal emotional states due to changes in blood pressure and adrenaline. That's possibly how they could have separated the guilty from the innocent man, as if they have a built-in lie detector with their highly sophisticated sonar. Imagine if we had that ability to sonar scan each other. We would be transparent to one another. Instant MRIs. You know, the Cetacean Nation is a leisure society. It predates ours by some 20 million years. That's how long dolphins and whales have been out there. You know, man has been on Earth for roughly 2 million years, and our future is being threatened by toxic pollution and short-term greed, which is devastating the environment. People say, come on, Michael, we're so much smarter than the whales and dolphins because we build buildings, we have culture, we create art. But ladies and gentlemen, in the long run, are we smarter? Could it be that we're measuring intelligence only from a selfish, narrow, egocentric perspective? Could it be that dolphins have no art? Because they do all things beautifully, that it's built directly into their life, that they sing when they speak. #1 selling album a few years ago, Songs of the Humpback Whales, that they dance when they swim. And instead of having to work for a living, they have figured out a way to spend most of their days at play. You know, along with human beings, killer whales are the most widespread mammal. They inhabit every ocean. Since 71% of our planet is covered with ocean, it should really be called Planet Ocean instead of Earth. The Pacific Ocean alone, where we are this week, the Pacific Ocean is larger than all the land continents combined. And most importantly, the animal that rules the oceans, the majority of our planet, they have never broken their umbilical cord to the environment, to Mother Earth, living in harmony with home. You know, we know next to nothing about animal intelligence and emotions. It's up to us to catch up to them, to open up our minds. Another impressive animal in Alaska, for different reasons, would be the bald eagle. They're amazing birds. They're huge up here. They're 3 feet tall. They can weigh up to 12 pounds. Wingspan is an incredible 7 feet across. They will dive out of the sky, they tuck their wings, and they plummet at 100 miles an hour. Then they slam on the brakes, stick those big wings out, and settle as softly as a parachute onto a treetop snag. You know, the other day, for an article I was reading about the Founding Fathers putting the finishing touches on the U.S. Constitution. Well, one of the last orders of business was choosing a national symbol, an animal, to represent the United States. Ben Franklin, who could be very persuasive. Ben Franklin stood up in Congress, and Franklin nominated the turkey. Then Thomas Jefferson, thank goodness, Jefferson insisted that our national symbol be the regal eagle. Thank goodness, for we could have the turkey today as our national symbol and be eating bald eagles for Thanksgiving. You know, out on my wild island, I can count on one hand the times I don't catch at least one fish to eat every day, and I'm a lousy fisherman. Most days you haul in half a boat full of fish without even trying. So I finally got smart. With my extra fish, I worked out a trade with the resident eagles that live on the island. The deal is, I leave them a few fish on the same spot of the beach day after day if they hold still for some close-up portraits. You know, one of the miracles in nature is an eagle's eyesight. They can see 8 times better than you can. Imagine having your binoculars for normal eyesight. From a distance of 1 mile away, a bald eagle can spot a tiny 8-inch fish on the surface of the sea. They have what's known as high-definition eyesight. A couple of lovebirds, bald eagles mate for life. Now, this is one of the very few that do. Less than 3% of the entire animal kingdom is monogamous, only having one partner. Bald eagles live about 25 years. They pair up when they're adults at 5 years of age. That's when they get the white feathers on their heads and tails. When eagles are courting, when they're dating each other, it is spectacular. They soar together, high in the sky, straight up, about a mile above the ocean. Then in midair, they reach out their legs and they lock their talons or claws together in midair. And then they free fall, cartwheeling one over the other. Then they let go just a few feet above the ocean. Makes dinner in a movie seem kind of tame. You know, the mated pairs use the same nest up here year after year. Bald eagle nests get huge in Alaska. These nests have to be repaired each spring after the winter storms and before the arrival of the chicks. And bald eagles will use most anything, natural or man-made, to reinforce their nests. You know, the north end of my island is exposed to open ocean, and the eagles love to beachcomb found objects. Unfortunately, passing fishing boats throw things overboard, but some of that litter is well received by opportunistic eagles. One morning, I climbed up to an eagle nest. The parents were gone. They were out fishing in the morning. I wanted to get up to a nest to photograph the chicks. Well, when I got up there and I looked down into the bottom of the nest, I almost fell out of the tree. Spread out in the bottom of the eagle nest was the front page of the New York Times. Home delivery, but without that blue plastic wrapper. It was spread out in the bottom of the eagle nest as a diaper for the chicks. They normally use moss to line the bottom of the nest. Then, a few days later, after that lofty journalism was soiled, Mama Eagle kicked it out, and there was the newspaper recycling directly back into the forest floor. A couple weeks later, I'm sitting in the cabin, cup of coffee, and there's another eagle nest about 2 miles away. Through my binoculars, I saw a long white object that the eagles had woven vertically down through the sides of the nest. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what it was. It looked man-made, like it was elastic or stretched. Couldn't figure out what it was until I got in the kayak and paddled over there. It was a lady's bikini top. In an eagle's nest. That bra worked wonders on holding an eagle nest together, but it sure wreaked havoc with a lonely hermit's heart. Ladies and gentlemen, come back to Alaska in the wintertime for an incredible sight. You can see 3,000 bald eagles along a 3-mile stretch of the Chilkat River near the town of Haines, just south of Skagway. From November to February, there's a salmon run up the Chilkat in the dead of winter. The river stays ice-free due to warm subterranean springs. Chilkat is a Tlingit native word meaning salmon storehouse, and that the river is, attracting thousands of eagles that fly all the way up from California in the winter to feed on the salmon. Great shot by local Juneau photographer, my buddy Mark Kelly. This is the main reason why there's so much wildlife here. Just about every animal in Alaska eats salmon. Here we have a king salmon, largest of the 5 species. This one weighed 38 pounds. Largest salmon ever caught on a rod and reel by a human being, 97 pounds, 4 ounces in 1985, Kenai River, Alaska. Largest salmon ever caught was in a net in Alaska. It weighed 126 pounds. Speaking of giants, this is the brown bear, coastal grizzly. Standing on its hind legs in Alaska, this bear can be 9 feet tall. It can weigh over 1,000 pounds. They're so powerful, they can kill a moose with just one swipe of a mighty paw. When you guys go hiking in the Alaska wilderness, away from the towns, be bear aware, because you are the trespasser. The trails out there in the remote are made by bears, not by man. And those bear highways have been out there for thousands of years. So when you go hiking up here in the wilderness, it is best to make a lot of noise on those trails to warn the bears of your approach. If you're a lousy singer, that is the time to belt out a Puccini opera at the top of your lungs. Standard issue for hikers in Alaska. We all wear a bear bell. You can buy one at the hardware store in Juneau. It's a jingle bell. You tie it on your shoelaces, clip it on your backpack. As you're hiking, with every step on the trail, the bell peals, the bear hears it, steps off the trail, and the twain shall rarely meet. However, if you see this, you're too close. Bears attack under 2 conditions, and it's usually always our fault. If you get between a mother and her cubs, you're going to trigger one of the most powerful forces in nature, maternal instinct. 70% of all grizzly attacks on human beings are triggered by a perceived danger to a mother's cubs. They will also attack if you suddenly surprise them. If you ever find yourself this close to a bear, please do not run, because as big as they are, they can flat out fly. A brown bear weighing over 1,000 pounds can cover 50 yards in just 3 seconds. There's not a human being on earth that can run that fast. Best thing to do, fall to the ground, curl up in a fetal position, protect your head with your arms and hands, and turtle down under your backpack. Play dead. Once the bear feels that the threat is gone to its cubs, or you're not trying to take away its kill, this is a grizzly bear resting after killing a mountain goat. One of you, passenger Mike Smith, the mayor of Buckingham, England, he shot this picture out of the bus coming down from the Yukon, one of the Princess tours. So they will lash out if you suddenly show up in their kill zone when they're feeding on a goat, deer, or a moose. So once you remove the threat by playing dead and being still, the bear will then back off and move on. And contrary to popular belief, not a good idea to climb a tree. Look who might be waiting for you at the top. Ladies and gents, bears are as individual. They are as unpredictable in their behavior as people. And like us, each bear has a totally different personality. Most bears are good-natured, like this dancing disco cub. But there are a few bears, just like us, that are downright nasty, but very few. In the area, in and around Juneau, Alaska, that we're now in 20 years here, in this wilderness region, one woman was run over by a bear that appeared to be running scared from something else. In a single year in this area, 157 people were assaulted by other people. As the author Richard Nelson wrote, more people die each year from bad potato salad than from grizzly bears. A couple of years ago, absolutely true story. I know this guy. He's a biologist, a professor. You could take his word to the bank. Bob was hiking on Kodiak Island, north of us, that has the largest brown bears in the world, up to 1,600 pounds, Kodiak bears. Bob's coming up a trail deep in the forest when he saw Big Mama Bear to his right, her 3 cubs to his left, and oh my, he is standing dead center between them. That's the absolute worst attack situation, to separate a mother from her kids. What finally triggers Big Mama to charge is if one of her cubs gives a nervous squeak. Sure enough, a cub squeaked. Big Mama charged. She swatted the man to the ground, and then, instead of ripping his head off, Big Mama sat on him until her 3 children safely crossed the trail. Then she got up and shuffled away into the woods. Bob was lucky. He ran into a sweetie, a good-natured mama bear. So not all bears are automatic killers. In the book Among the Bears, Ben Killiam writes, June 1873 in New Hampshire, a small girl, age 3, wandered off into the woods. Neighbors searched for her for 4 days. When they finally found her, she was sleeping under a pine tree with bear tracks all around her. The little girl said that a big black dog had found her and slept with her every night to keep her warm. And it works both ways. Last year up here in Alaska, a yearling brown bear cub, 1 year old, was seen roaming in Alaska forest alone. Its mother nowhere to be seen. Maybe she was shot by a hunter, or the mother died accidentally. A backpacker came along. He was tired after hiking all day, and in the late afternoon, the guy was dragging. He needed a nap. So the man walked off into the woods for some shut-eye. He stretched out on a springy moss bed. The hiker woke up about an hour later, hearing snoring, not his own. It was the yearling bear cub, sleeping on its side, facing the man, just 5 yards away. And so relaxed was that little bear, he was snoring away. The man said he got the impression that the cub was lonely and would have spooned or cuddled with him next. He missed his mama. The hiker alerted the Forest Service. They live-trapped the cub, took him up into the high country, introduced him to a mama bear who had lost a cub, and she willingly adopted and took that little bear in. In his book, True Grizz, Doug Chadwick writes, a couple is living out in the Alaska wilderness, way out there, near a salmon stream. One day they look up from their chores. They suddenly became aware that their daughter was no longer in sight. Slightly past the toddler stage, she had wandered some distance from the cabin because the parents heard no answer as they raced about, calling her name. They widened their search, but they couldn't find her anywhere. After a while, the little girl came skipping back home. They hugged her frantically and demanded to know where she had been. I was out playing with the bear family, she told them. Sometime later, they wandered along the river and they found their daughter's footprints in the sand mixed with the fresh tracks of a large grizzly bear and 2 smaller ones. From what they and local biologists could read of that story in the sand, that little girl had indeed been playing with a wild grizzly bear family. Ladies and gentlemen, what's the common element in each of these accounts? Children. 2 human, 1 bear. Could it be that children have not yet learned to fear and hate and project that fear and hate onto the, quote, enemy? That keeps them safe, immune to danger, occupying not the slightest space in their minds. And our minds control our reality, maybe even more so at the age of innocence. As the Zen master Shunryu Suzuki writes, In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the overtrained expert's mind, there are very few. In the port town, starting in a couple hours in Juneau, we're gonna see a whole slew of bear attack books. They're gonna have sensational, bloodthirsty titles like Danger Stalks the Land. But ladies and gents, it isn't the bear who's the most dangerous animal on earth. That is us. Man has killed 99% of all the grizzly bears in the mainland United States. You know, let's look at it from the bear's point of view, or the buffalo, or the beaver, or the wolf, or the passenger pigeon. If most animals got together and they all wrote a book called People Attacks, man would be the most aggressive and merciless killer of them all. From the Native American Luther Standing Bear, only to the white man was nature a wilderness, and only to him was the land infested with wild animals and savage people. To us, it was tame. Earth was bountiful. We were surrounded with the blessings of the great mystery. In the old days, before the Native Americans could go to a drugstore or a trading post, they followed the bears through the woods and they ate exactly what the bears ate to stay healthy. You know, when a bear is born, it weighs less than 1 pound. It would fit in the palm of your hand. Just 6 years later, they can be 1,000 pounds of solid muscle. Now they get that big and strong, not from a grocery store, but from what they eat, superfoods out in nature. To this day, the native people say it was bear who showed them many of their foods and much of their natural medicine. No human botanist knows the plants the way that a bear does. Last year up here in Alaska, a hunter had a big grizzly bear in his sights. The bear was sitting on its butt and it was carefully stripping bark with its claws off of willow shrubs, which bears are not known to eat. After the hunter unfortunately shot the animal, he noticed that the bear had an infected tooth. The bear had packed the area around that bad tooth with that willow bark, which is the source of salicylic acid and the main natural ingredient in our aspirin. Summertime in Alaska, a big banquet for these bears to regain lost weight during winter hibernation. Salmon is the main food source. At the peak of the pig out, in July and August, a brown bear is a non-stop food processor. It will devour up to 30 6-pound salmon a day. They'll take in a whopping 100,000 calories a day, enabling adult bears to regain close to 300 pounds, 1/3 of their body weight in the summertime, because heading into another winter hibernation of 7 months when they don't eat at all in the cave, it is survival of the fattest. So what is the true nature of the bear? John Weldy has been working with grizzly bears since he was a boy. The bears have appeared in many TV shows, Disney movies, educational presentations. John ranks their intelligence right up there with primates. John's wife, Monica, says that Ginger, a yearling female, is totally in love with her husband. So much so that during mating season, March and April, Ginger pushes Monica aside with her big butt to get next to John, to flirt and cuddle with him. At an educational presentation, one of the grizzly bears started digging up the ground. John admonished her sternly, "No, Carol." She immediately stopped digging in the schoolyard. Then with her paw, on her own, she pushed the sizable earth that she moved back into the hole. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe someday we will accept animals as not being below or beneath us, but fellow brethren, linked together in paradise earth. As the Native Americans say, all creations, my relations. You know, one night I'm on the island, I'm sound asleep, I'm dreaming that I accompanied, that somehow a musician was out there playing my favorite woodwind instrument, the oboe. The sound was so haunting and melodic. It sounded something like this. Oh! let's all try one together. A group howl. Ready? Everybody on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh! That was great. Doesn't it feel good to howl? You guys are now official members of the Golden Princess Wolfpack. Whenever we pass each other in the hallways or in the dining rooms downtown Juneau this afternoon, no talking. We must howl. So that night on the island, you're hearing that wild night music. It chills your soul. Remnant memory kicks in. Guard hairs at the back of your neck vibrate like wires. Wolves. You jump out of bed. You grab a rifle and a flashlight. You crack open your cabin door, and with a trembling hand, you stick the flashlight out into the night first. They are howling all around your cabin. When the light beam touches 6 pairs of eyes, the wolf pack runs away. Ladies and gentlemen, contrary to Hollywood movies that often turn animals into monsters, it is so sad that violence still sells the most tickets in our culture. What does that say about us? That we find entertainment in watching dramatized murders and brutalities. In the main directive, in our TV newsrooms, to get us to tune in and watch the news, there's a saying: if a story bleeds, it leads. And the animal falsehoods start early, even in our fairy tales of Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. El Lobo has gotten a bum rap. It's as if that seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. We see what we believe to exist, and the filter of belief and preconception that we look through, it's often faulty. The world we see isn't the world that is, especially with wildlife. It's as if we've projected our own fears and violence onto the wolf, made them the villain, when in reality, they are shy by nature. They are extremely intelligent. There has never ever been one recorded case in the United States of a wild, healthy wolf attacking a human being. You know, all dogs are related to wolves, their distant ancestors. In the Alaska Husky, the predominant dog up here, has a direct connection with the wolf, sharing that same outdoor wilderness environment. Originally, wolves found man, and man created dog. Most famous dog sled race in Alaska, the Iditarod. Imagine that's you. With your dog team, you're going to go for 1,000 continuous miles across the toughest terrain in the world. One of the Iditarod mushers, Fred Agri, has 30 sled dogs in his kennel. He gives them constant care, 24/7, keeping what he calls my 4-legged athletes in tip-top condition. You know, along with being a serious musher, Fred has a great sense of humor. One day I was visiting and he said, "Mike, I'm originally from New York City, the Bronx. I spent half my life living downtown, but now, somehow, I've gotten so good at breeding sled dogs in Alaska, I have Eskimos buying them from me." Go figure. That's Fred's backyard, Mount McKinley, Denali, the mountain to the left, tallest mountain in North America, 20,000 feet up to the summit. Looks so close like you could reach out and hug it. Beautiful spring day. Fred wanted to give the dogs a workout, a tune-up for the Iditarod, but I was the one whose tongue was hanging out, because to get us across that deep, fluffy snowfield, I had to be the lead dog. Strap on cross-country skis and smash down a trail through the snow for the sled dogs to follow. Iditarod starts in downtown Anchorage every March, finishes 1,049 miles, and about 9 days later, the winner crosses the finish line in a small town called Nome at the top of the state. If you guys came here a few years ago, the #1 selling t-shirt in all these Alaskan shops that you're soon going to see, that t-shirt had a slogan printed across the front: Alaska, where men are men and women win the Iditarod. You know, 30 years ago, when all the men got together to start the Iditarod, you know what they said? We shouldn't even let women enter. The poor, weak little creatures. They'll never be able to finish this race, let alone ever win it. Well, you may have heard of a gal by the name of Susan Butcher. Susan put all doubts to rest. Susan Butcher won the Iditarod 4 times, and each time she shattered her own speed record. Very first woman to win the Iditarod, Libby Riddles. Libby ventured out into a killer storm near the end of the race. The wind chill temperature was 100 degrees below zero. That is the type of Arctic storm even Eskimos are afraid to go out into. That gutsy gamble, going out into the very teeth of that severe storm, won Libby and her dogs the victory, worldwide fame and glory. This Arctic ingenue moved up here to Alaska from Minnesota, St. Cloud. She didn't know anybody up here when she was just 16 years old. There is now no finer role model for women and men than Libby Riddles. We're so privileged, you guys. Later today, try to make it back onto the ship, 7 p.m. in the Vista Theater at the back of Deck 7. Libby Riddles herself will be aboard our ship to give you a program all about her Iditarod victory and inspiring life in Alaska. I love Libby. I call her Miss Alaska. This woman represents the very best of this place. Libby Riddles is constant courage in the cold. You know, to work and play with these dogs is a learning experience. One of the many amazing things about them. They're so smart. They're half wolf. Whenever you need to discipline them, you should never hit them or crack a whip like in those old movies. What you do with the smarter ones is you embarrass them with your tone of voice in front of all the other dogs, the dog pack. And that alone is punishment enough, making them lose face in front of their peers, a temporary drop down in dog hierarchy. If anybody's thinking, poor doggies, having to pull that heavy sled, well, you get out a harness, they jump into it, and they are mad at you for days if you leave them behind in the kennel and you don't take them out on a training run. You know, sled dogs give fresh meaning to that expression, jump for joy. Here we have 4 dogs, 16 legs, and just 3 paws touching the ground. Check out their feet. Anybody that can man a sewing needle is busy all year before the Iditarod making booties. There's 21 medical checkpoints along the race trail. The dogs are looked over by nose to tail by veterinarians to make sure they're healthy. Greatest danger for the dogs is slicing their feet on the sharp snow and ice. So one of the mushers' main jobs is keeping their pups in socks. You know, being part wolf, when excited, Alaska sled dogs mostly howl instead of barking like their domesticated cousins. You know, hanging around huskies, it inspires you to be the person your dog thinks you are. In the Inside Passage, where we're cruising this week, nearly all the animals out there swim island to island in search of food. Even cougars ride the tide. They chase deer, main food supply. You know, I thought cats hated water. You ever try to give a kitty cat a bath in the sink at home? They shred the flesh off your arms in protest. On the island, every spring, I plant a half-acre garden. I love fresh vegetables. But then, as those of you who have a garden out in the countryside know full well, it seems like our gardens are out there for just one reason: to feed the deer. No matter what wire or driftwood I scrounged up in the wilderness for a fence, the deer jumped like pogo sticks over my skimpy fence, and they'd eat half my garden. Finally, a native fisherman came by one day, holding out a lady's perfume bottle, a little cut glass vial. "Mike, I got your fence. Let's tear all that junky wire down." Then, in each corner of that totally open garden, Billy carefully, almost ceremoniously, dribbled a few drops of that amber-colored liquid just in the 4 corners. A deer, not a one, ever set foot again in that totally open garden. I'd see deer pour out of the woods licking their chops. Then they ran, helter-skelter, as if they hit an invisible force field. That substance was cougar urine. If anybody wants to invest in a sure thing, hey, we could sell this at Home Depot. Let's call our new product the Invisible Fence or Deer Away. Only as partners, you guys milk the cougars. and I'll do the marketing. You know, first time you see a moose in Alaska, you might think they are clumsy, brutish beasts, but au contraire, the bull moose is considered by biologists to be the best lover in the animal kingdom. The act of mating for moose lasts 2 to 3 hours, with the male especially attentive to its mate. Moose love, who knew? Is there anything cuter than a baby moose? Nothing but long legs and eyelashes. This one we found lost in the woods after it got separated from mama, now growing up with an orphan fawn on a wildlife preserve in British Columbia. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest thing about living in this wilderness, if I had to pick one experience, my goodness, I am so sorry, this always chokes me up. This is one of the few places out there where you can experience this state of grace, amazing grace, when there was once total trust between man and animals, no walls or barriers. This fox came to visit one day. At first she was shy. She stayed back about 50 yards. Then after 6 months of seeing each other day after day, that gap closed down to just 5 yards between us. Francine would sit on her back legs and watch the island hermit chop wood, plant the garden, fillet a big fish. And as much as I was tempted, I never fed her. I wanted her to be there that close because she wanted to be, not because I was giving her food. There was such trust that developed between us. Francine would bring her kids, her young ones, to me to babysit. One of the greatest honors I've ever received. Francine carried them in her mouth and she dropped them on my feet while she went off into the woods hunting. You know, one winter I got sick. I was burning up with fever. As cold as it was, I just kicked open the cabin door for some fresh air. Then I passed out. I was near comatose on the daybed, and my arm and hand must have been dangling over the side, because when I came to, there was something nibbling on my fingertips. I opened my eyes, and I looked into these eyes. It was Francine, the wild fox, inside the cabin with a look of genuine concern. You know, when I was a child in Cleveland, Ohio, thank goodness, my mother read me to sleep every single night. One of those stories was about St. Francis of Assisi. How I love that story. I had Mom read it to me again and again. As a boy, how I wished that someday I too could grow up to be friends with wild animals. That dream came true with such sweetness right here in the Inside Passage. Ladies and gentlemen, read to your children constantly to fire up their minds, but especially as they fall asleep. And in their subconscious, which never sleeps, you'll plant the seeds of magical possibility. And for all of us, reading is the key to being a lifelong learner. Francine is now gone. She's dead. Natural causes, lifespan for a wild fox, about 10 to 12 years. But her kids now come out of the den. Whenever I return to the island, they romp over to you and they untie your shoelaces with their teeth. It is their way to say that they want you to stay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be a tough guy, but they always get to me. You know, I'd like to conclude with a familiar conundrum. We've all heard this saying. If a tree fell in the forest and no one was around, would it make a sound? But again, how selfish, how egocentric of us to think that we are the only ones listening, the only verifiers of reality. What about the amazing animals with their supercharged senses? In fact, the animals can do things we can't even approach. If a single leaf fell on the forest, the moose would hear it, the wolf would smell it, and the eagle would see it flutter in crisp detail all the way down. The word animal is derived from the Latin word anima, meaning soul. If the eyes are the windows or the lamps of the soul, someone is definitely at home, switched on and shining in these two Alaska sled dogs. Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest and philosopher, wrote, "The animal knows, of course, but it doesn't know that it knows. Lacking self-awareness in an ego destructive to its own environment. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the animals' world, and we just carefully live in it. Thank you so much. I want to hear you howl and Juno.